It is complicated. We have several systems we're looking at. This one here is our primary storm, and that is the one that'll be our focus for the next 3 days, actually. And from that storm system, we have a dry line punching out into the plains this evening, and that has been the focusing mechanism for some thunderstorms as well. Further to the east, we have a little secondary low, which actually is causing the tornadoes in Minnesota right now. That is the system which will be absorbed by our other storm later on tonight.
All right, let's talk about the dry line and see if you can explain briefly what that is, and then we'll take a look at the radar and show where the thunderstorms are developing.
Sure. As you can see on the dew point map here, we have dew points in Nebraska in the lower 70s, and behind the dry line, we have dew points in the 30s. And right where those two air masses meet is what we call the dry line, where the dry air punches into the moist air.
All right, we have first off a radar here, and actually here's where you can see this line coming through Bismarck is actually along that dry line.
That is correct. As the dry air punched out into the plains earlier this afternoon, it developed these thunderstorms rather quickly, and these are the thunderstorms which eventually we are looking for severe weather to form out of. But out ahead of that, we had these other thunderstorms fire up earlier this afternoon.
So far along that dry line band of thunderstorms, we haven't had severe weather, but you think as it moves east that we're going to see that change?
Correct. The air mass that was ahead of it initially wasn't as moist as the air that's currently over Minnesota. So once it gets into the deeper tropical air, that's when thunderstorms could really get ferocious later on.
Okay, let's talk about that later on. For tonight, places like Minneapolis so far haven't seen severe weather. Chicago kind of in the waiting zone, as is Indianapolis. So see if you can give me a little timing here.
Sure. The thunderstorms we have coming through the Dakotas now will be in Minneapolis later on this evening. And then during the overnight hours, they'll be moving through western Wisconsin and western Illinois. And right around daybreak, they'll get into the bigger cities like Milwaukee and Chicago. And then around noontime tomorrow, they'll refire in the Indianapolis area and also up towards Grand Rapids in Michigan.
Okay, so other big cities that could be affected tomorrow afternoon?
As the system continues to move to the east, it looks like Detroit will eventually get involved tomorrow later in the day, as will Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Okay, that's definitely what we'll be watching for in the next 24 hours. Kevin, thanks very much for your help there. Again, severe weather for this evening. Now a couple of warnings. One tornado warning for Polk County, Minnesota. We'll keep you up to date on the radars, and we'll also keep you up to date on our tropical storm. And we'll hand it back to Mike Bono in the studio for the details on that.
Right, Jill. You know, you've also had a lot of rain today along parts of the eastern seaboard, and of course talking about Ana, the first tropical storm of the season. Let's introduce you to Ana right now, and there we have it, that little red circle with that typical tropical symbol that we're seeing right now east of about the Georgia coastline and 300 miles south-southeast of Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, moving east to 10. Winds now sustained at least 45 miles an hour. As it was a depression, we were telling you 35 for a long time, but it hopped up, the airplanes went in, the reconnaissance aircraft found winds that locally were well over 50 miles an hour. So this is we're really winding up out there. It's fighting some elements, but doing well in some others. Pressure 1,002, even at times down to 1,001 millibars. Now, the fight goes on. We see westerly flow in upper levels carrying the debris, we call it, the high cirrus clouds from the tops of towers of showers and thunderstorms and squalls out there. Very heavy rain. But the center of Ana is right about here, exposed, low clouds with some rain around it, but the big guns, the big tall clouds are off to the east. That's called wind shear, and that's why it's not getting any stronger. It's going to move out to sea west of Bermuda through the goalposts between Bermuda and Hatteras and right up to maybe south of Nova Scotia, so no real threat. But the current temperatures are, I'll tell you, 102 in Dodge City, 89 in Chicago, is hot and humid, 78 New York, and then upwards toward 100 in Amarillo and Midland, 93 in Burbank today, so you're getting a bit of a Santa Ana breeze in the LA basin. Low pressure moving on toward North Dakota with all that wind and stormy weather. Our tropical storm off the coastline.
Tough, flamboyant figure. He heads the 10th government in 20 months. The U.S. military commander, General Westmoreland. Westmoreland now commands 350,000 troops. And on his recommendation, Johnson agrees to a huge increase. The thousands become prostitutes. In 1966, the U.S. Army reports that 1 in every 4 GIs has venereal disease. 2.5 million young American men, Vietnam is a part of growing up.
I think the women are too fast for us boys here.
Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather. Forecasts from the Weather Channel are also available from the following.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's July 1st, so we have 1 month of tropical weather, the hurricane season, behind us. Still several months to go, and well, today, the 1st of July, and the first time that we actually have a tropical storm to tell you about in the Atlantic. So a lot of hurricane forecasters are quite excited. I guess they're a little bit busy now. Things will be gearing up from here on out. We are currently looking at what occurred over the past 12 to 24 hours. It was a tropical depression, and it is now a tropical storm. Probably for the past 12, maybe 15 hours, it has had tropical storm strength sustained winds. The sustained winds are at 45 miles per hour, the maximum sustained winds. It is continuing to move east at this time. Now, Tropical Storm Ana is about 300 miles just south-southeast of the Carolina Cape area, Hatteras. So if you are, doing some boating, then it might be a little bit of a problem if you head out more than 100 miles or so. But other than that, it is really not a problem. The surf, not really that extensive either. Keep in mind that it is moving away from the land to the east. Now, eventually, we're going to see a more northerly turn with Ana, and I apologize for this visual. Let's see if we can get a better look here. Yeah, this is the infrared. What we are noticing is our mid-level winds and our upper air winds. You see how this is kind of pushing off the coastal area of the Carolinas and across Tropical Storm Ana? Well, the eye of Ana about here, so you can see a lot of the convection is actually to the east, and so with that, that's kind of a hindrance for development. And so in the forecast, we're not noting that they're expecting any increase in strength. It has picked up in the past day or so as far as moving a little bit faster than what we were reporting yesterday, and certainly the winds are now tropical storm strength, so it did increase some. But it's likely also, we have a ridge of high pressure out towards the Atlantic. We're also seeing a low that's coming in towards the mainland country, and that's going to squeeze the path of Tropical Storm Ana on a more northerly direction. At least that's what the dynamics are indicating at this time. But boy, isn't that exciting? Isn't that interesting? The first tropical storm of the season for the Atlantic. Well, if we get down to Bill or Claudette, we can really just jump for joy if this is the kind of thing that you like to monitor. Of course, we ask that you keep in mind that when we give you this information, it's for the safety of not only the tourist attraction along the coastal vicinity, but just for the residents. And of course, meteorologically speaking, it's kind of exciting. So the hurricane hunters are probably still looking at all of the information that the Air Force reconnaissance plane recently reported. I can also tell you that Hurricane Ana has a millibar pressure of around 1,002 at this time. Looking for July, now we were showing you all last month how warm the Caribbean and the Gulf and the Caribbean were, and that was where we saw a lot of the development, right? Well, the temperatures are beginning to warm up a little bit further than that, and notice the curvature here. The blue lines indicate the more frequent path a tropical storm or a hurricane is likely to take, right? And notice that how if it does develop towards the Caribbean and the Gulf, it has a more westerly movement, but because of the high pressure, generally speaking, we get that movement that becomes eventually a little bit more northerly, at least when we're talking about the path that is just to the east of the Carolina coastline. Okay, so for the month of July, we'll look at just the first couple of weeks outside of the Caribbean and outside of the Gulf. We're beginning to see some development. And again, this is because we're getting into the warmer part of the season, and it is more likely that we will see some storm development outside the Gulf and outside of the Caribbean. In the afternoon, we've seen a few sea breezes, and that means some big thunder boomers in and along the very southwesterly coastline of Cuba and also Puerto Rico. We've had some showers and a few thunderstorms in the afternoon. Looking at the coastal areas for Venezuela, we're looking at the area that has been a little bit more quiet with the intertropical zone not quite as active.
There's a big cover-up performed by millions of...
Very decently, that dry line. Also, you can see the tornadoes breaking out across that area. Again, this is 7.5 minutes between each picture, so we're looking at a couple of hours.
Correct. The dry line is punching out through South Dakota right there, and as that intersects with the old thunderstorm complex in eastern South Dakota and Minnesota, that's where we're really getting our added lift for the tornadoes.
And as far as severe weather goes, let's advance to the radar now and show you the storms. And we just got word from the Storm Prediction Center, just heard from them, a new tornado watch up until 1 a.m. for parts of Minnesota.
Being the big day on your 4th of July, I guess a couple of big questions here is, number one, how hot is it going to get? Am I going to be able to do that outdoor barbecue thing or even get in a tennis game? If you're going to play tennis, I'd say play it in the morning over the south. It's going to be so hot in the midday and afternoon. You're really kind of taking chances because of the heat indices are going to be well up over 110, might even approach 115 in some places. Hot and humid, folks, over the south, and basically on the dry side as far as any rain. But there will be some rain and some clouds up around the Great Lakes. The other big question on the 4th.
The Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
Time to take a look at the tropics, folks, and we're going to start off with our first named tropical storm of the Atlantic season. That is Ana, centered at 31.3 north, 72.1 west. This as of the 11 p.m. advisory from the Hurricane Center. 340 miles southeast of Hatteras, that's where the center is located. Notice that it is moving east at 10 miles an hour. That is away from the east coast of the U.S., as it has been throughout its life. Pressure down to 1,001 millibars. That's the lowest we have seen so far. Now again, Ana became a tropical storm during the afternoon as a hurricane hunter flew out there and found that particularly in some of the squalls east and even south of the center that the winds were gusting at times even sustained up over hurricane strength. At that point the Hurricane Center went ahead and named Ana. So again, first system of the Atlantic season, first named tropical system. A couple of points to be made here. Number one is there's still a lot of shear going on in the atmosphere, and by that I mean there's a lot of very strong upper level winds. They will probably lessen a little bit over the next day or two, so there is a slight chance of some strengthening. But we don't think there's going to be a lot of significant strengthening with Ana. But even if there is, the second point to be made is we think Ana is going to be staying offshore. So don't be canceling any outdoor activity plans because of this tropical storm out here. It looks like it will be taking more of a northeast or north to northeast track as we head on through the next several days. But that should keep it offshore of the eastern seaboard. Upper level winds too strong here, and there's really no mechanism to bring it back toward the coast at this point. So that's the way we like tropical storms, weak and offshore of any landmass. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even appear as if it's going to directly affect Bermuda, although with squalls off to the east side, there might be some slight effect as it moves on by in the next day or two. So we have Ana now, and maybe Bill, Claudette, Danny, Erica on down the line. Let's hope we don't get too far into the season, or into the list of names as we head through the season. Kate, by the way, would be as many as Dr. Gray forecasted, so we'll have to wait and see. We do have Ana now. As we head on through July, we start to expand our area. Obviously, Ana formed here off the Carolinas, but you can expand it all the way out, particularly during the end of July, out here into the middle of the Atlantic. Remember last year, Hurricane Bertha formed way out here. I know that one well. It kind of interrupted my vacation out there on the Outer Banks last year. So again, it's not unprecedented to get storms forming off the Carolina coast or Georgia. That's exactly where Ana formed today, and that has happened. 19 storms have formed over the first 10 days of July. Is there anything else out there? Is there a Bill forming? That would be the second named tropical system in the Atlantic. Doesn't look like it, folks. Looks like a bit of a trough hanging out here in the Caribbean. You can see some of these clouds moving northbound. Conditions really unfavorable for any kind of development here, and things about as quiet as